G'day everyone, I'm David Reidy and welcome to Piano Finally, a podcast by an old bloke who's learning to play the piano, finally. Well, welcome to episode 1. This one's entitled Deciding to Start. Thank you very much to everyone who downloaded and listened to last week's episode, the prelim, the introductory one if you like. This is a real first episode and sort of is going to be in the format that at least I'm going to begin with. It may well change in the future. It did last time. So I'm going to start with what I've been doing during the week. I have 2 lessons on Mondays, one for a half an hour and one for 3/4 of an hour, which certainly keeps me busy after work. I do get to practice at least every day. I do that by getting up early, about 40 minutes before I need to leave, so I can fit about a half an hour of practice in before I leave the house in the morning. And most evenings, I'll get a half an hour in unless I'm late home. For example, Fridays is the debating team and I run that, so I'm at that, and if I'm not too tired. So generally during the week, I'll get in about 3.5 hours in the morning and probably another 2.5 hours in the afternoon, which seems to be doing okay at the moment. Last week, I promised I'd explain the music that I use at the beginning. I don't know if you've recognised it. It's the last 3 bars of J.S. Bach's Crab Canon, or it's the first 3 bars played backwards, take your pick. The reason I'm using it at the moment is it's possibly one of the bits of music that really got me interested in musical theory. Back in 1979, a book called Gödel, Escher, Bach, An Eternal Golden Braid came out. It was written by Douglas Hofstadter. And sometime in the next year or two, while I was starting at university, it got recommended to me and I read it. At that stage, I was doing physics and advanced mathematics and things. And it turns out, of course, that there's a lot of maths in music, especially a lot of maths in Bach's music. So it sort of fitted in nicely. I wasn't playing any instruments at the time, but I was still interested in the maths and the way that interacted with the music. So while I was at the Mount Stromlo Observatory working over the summer of 1982 and 83, I read a lot of Hofstadter's other works because they had them in the library. They had a full set of Scientific Americans and he used to write for those. And Daniel Dennett's work, he was writing for them at the same time. And that's really what got me interested in music theory. So even though I wasn't playing anything at the time, but I've kept that interest and hence the selection of a bit of Bach for the beginning of the podcast. That may well change. And incidentally, I don't play that well. I do play it. I played it on a keyboard, just not on a piano keyboard. I played that one on a computer keyboard and I'm using MuseScore and a forte piano to play it. The goal is to learn to play the piece myself and not put me in at the beginning of the podcast instead of a MuseScore recording. Each episode is going to have a theme, and as this is the first real episode, I decided to start at the beginning. So this week I'm going to talk about deciding to start to learn to play the piano when I'm slightly past the age where your mum tells you you're going to be learning to play the piano or somebody else tells you at school you're going to be learning it. So my biggest barrier to starting learning the piano as an adult was making the decision to start at all. The number one problem that I thought I had, and which I've heard from many other adults, is that there is simply not enough time to do things. Now, I still work full-time. I teach, as I've mentioned before. It keeps me very busy, and sometimes work does fill up all my available hours, and I really don't have any spare time, especially when it comes to marking and things like that and report writing, which in fact is happening over the next 2 weeks. But that only happens a few times a year, and most of the time, work stays within work hours, which is handy. But everybody fills up their time. Firstly, with all those things you have to do, and then with the things you probably should do, like mowing the lawn and those sorts of things that don't always need to be done, but you've got to get to them eventually. Then you can do the things you like to do, and then there's all the filler material. I'm not including sleep time. So filler material has become much more accessible in recent years, and that's why I think it's become a bigger problem. In the past, at the end of the day, when you've done everything else, you might sit down to watch a TV program. Back when TV was broadcast at set times and you had to be sitting in front of it. But now you can watch TikTok or YouTube and fill in the wait for a bus or lining up in the supermarket. And of course, once you start watching those, it's very easy for them to leak into other times when you could be doing other things. In my case, I keep finding lots of great things to watch on YouTube. But I've been able to cut that down a bit through telling myself I really shouldn't be watching all the stuff on YouTube. I still watch YouTube for a lot of good things to do with work and to do with piano, but I've cut out a lot of the just watching it to see what's going on. So my first step was to work out that if I cut down on random YouTube watching, would I have enough time to get some practice in each day? And yes. And I know from teaching that lots of small amounts of practice are much better than occasional big blocks. Now, if I could just convince my students of that and get them to revise throughout the term rather than just before the exams, I would be a much happier teacher. So I decided I could fit in half an hour a day with another half an hour sometimes. The next barrier, though, was getting an instrument to learn on. Pianos are expensive and they're difficult to move, so a keyboard of some type was going to be the best choice. Starting at the affordable end, there are two choices. A quite cheap keyboard that doesn't have all the features you need to learn properly, or you can spend more money and get a better unit that is closer to a real piano. The problem is that the better solution is 2 or 3 times the price. And while affordable, I didn't want to spend the money and then find out that piano playing was not for me. A solution presented itself. The 3 youngest members of my family are aged 2, 5 and 7. And I firmly believe that all children should have access to a musical instrument and that they should learn a second language and run around outside a lot and lots of other ideas. In this case, I thought that if I didn't take to piano playing, the keyboard I bought would make a perfect gift for them. And if I did like playing, I could still give it to them and buy myself something else. That's a story for another episode. So, one afternoon I was driving past a large piano shop and I thought I'd pop in to see prices and check availability. This shop mostly sold Roland electric keyboards and lots of traditional upright and grand pianos too. I knew to ask for a keyboard with 88 full-sized keys that was progressively weighted. I'd got that from watching some of those YouTube videos. The woman in the store showed me the Roland FP30X, which was available with a proper stand and with 3 pedals rather than the cheap standard one. Perfect for a beginner learner, whether that beginner learner was 61 or 5. I'll review that keyboard in a future episode. Wasting money is not a great thing to do. Wasting resources is worse. But knowing that there would be 3 other pairs of hands to use the keyboard was comforting. Having that fallback position of being able to give the keyboard a good home if things didn't work out made the purchase decision much simpler. As you can hear, I found that I really liked learning the piano, and my fingers still work well enough to manage the mechanical aspects of playing. The plan was that the keyboard would be a Christmas present this year, but other factors have come into play, so I'm taking it north to its new home in the July holidays. I'll let you know how it's received. One of the things that I'm a bit of a sucker for is buying books. I sort of don't count spending money on books as spending money, which sometimes turns into a problem. But anyway, so having decided to learn the piano, this opens up a whole new range of books to buy. So the first thing, of course, I did was to look at adult piano courses. There are lots and lots of kids' piano courses, and there's a few good adult ones, and I have bought more than one of them. So what I'm going to do is, in each episode, I'm going to review something that I have bought, usually a book, but I've been buying some gadgets as well, so I'll talk about those. And, of course, the keyboard that I first bought and the keyboard that I now use. So the first one I bought was the Nancy and Randall Faber Adult Piano Adventures book. They have an all-in-one piano course, which is spiral bound, and I knew to get something that was spiral bound if you possibly can, because it sits open much better. And it's fairly easy to pick up. Pretty much every music store I've been into has a copy of these books. There's a series of books. There's a first and a second one. I have the second one as well, of course, and I'll review that later. I actually haven't even had a proper look through that one yet. The nice part about these is their production value is incredibly high. And with the Fabers, not only do you get the book, but you also get access to audio and video tracks via mobile devices and the internet. And that just comes with the book. You're not paying any additional for that at all, which is great. It starts off very, very simply, so you'll probably hear some page-turning noises as I'm doing this. There's a very quick introduction to the piano, how to sit at it, what all the bits are called, labelling for your hands and stuff, just so you know what they're talking about as you're doing it. And it moves fairly quickly into actually playing music, which is nice. I mean, you've got the piano, you've got the book, you want to play something. It begins, however, without expecting you to be able to read music. It does it by numbering the keys. In this case, they start with Amazing Grace, which is played entirely on the black keys. They simply number them 3 and 2 for your left hand and 1, 2, 3, 5 for your right hand, and you play the numbers basically. They do move them up and down so you can see how the pitch changes, but realistically, after a minute or two, you should have a recognisable tune coming out of the piano, which is probably a really good place to start. Interestingly, at the bottom of both pages, there's a teacher duet, which I would assume, if you're not used to reading music, is a bit scary. The piece has 6 flats in it for the accompaniment. Of course, you're not meant to play the accompaniment. And parts throughout the book are like that all the way through. So although the book is designed to be used with a teacher, it is good enough to be able to be used alone, especially as you've got the support of the videos and the audio. And the other thing is this book is so well known that there are a number of independent YouTube channels that cover learning with this book. So it's very easy to get a lot of the support. It moves very quickly through the length of notes. So it goes through minims and crotchets fairly quickly. It goes through naming the notes and the treble and the bass staves. A little bit more, Merrily We Roll Along, not the Stephen Sondheim version, a different one. And eventually, by the time you are at around about page, and I'm just flipping through to find it, 28, you start to see the grand staff and mapping that to the keyboard. Although it does like 3 or 4 octaves, they don't expect you to play those. Very much to begin with, it's hands on, it's starting at middle C. A little bit about time signatures, so you can keep in time, and then the first real piece of music is Yankee Doodle Dandy, and it's written out with the letter names inside the circles on the notes. So again, after very little practice, it's possible to get things sounding okay. It then goes to Row, Row, Row Your Boat, and then one that actually uses pedals, and I'm not playing the pedals myself yet, but there is a pedal piece. I've put the pedal down at the beginning and hold it all the way through, but I haven't been doing very much with the pedals at all. It then moves on into further ones where they're introducing new rhythms and a slightly wider range of notes. The book is divided into units. I'll flip back to the table of contents. There are 16 units, starting, as I said, with all that stuff at the beginning just to get you going. But then it starts moving on to the different scales, the treble C pentascale, the G pentascales, eventually introducing sharps and flats and then intervals, and then the full C major scale, then into chords with G7 and C major chords, and the G major scale, and it ends up with the primary chords in G major. There's lots and lots of stuff in here to play, and it keeps coming back. So, for example, Amazing Grace turns up a number of times in the book, getting more and more complex as you go. And then there's a dictionary and everything at the back. I found it very easy to read, very easy to understand. If anything, I found it a little bit slow, but then, as I said, I came in knowing a bit of music theory. But it seems to be a well-paced book. And with all the additional backup that you've got, both from the book itself with the videos and the audio, and with all the YouTube online examples of people teaching from this book, there's a lot of support for someone who wanted to get this and start learning by themselves without the support of a teacher to begin with. So that is the Nancy and Randall Faber Adult Piano Adventures course. In Australia, it's less than $30, so it's not very expensive. It's quite a thick book. It has a good few hundred pages, and nice and sturdy. And as I said, it has a spiral binding, which makes it so much easier to use sitting at the piano. So I would recommend it. I got a little way through it before I moved on to having a piano teacher, but I've still got it, and I still look through it occasionally. And there's dozens of songs in there that you can sort of pick out that aren't too hard. There's an Amazon affiliate link in the show notes if you're interested. Even if you don't buy it, just pop over and have a look. You'll see some interesting things there. Well, as I said earlier, I sort of like watching things on YouTube. So one of the things I intend to include in most episodes is something else you can watch or listen to that's of interest. There's hundreds of them, and there's lots of really, really good things. And if you search on YouTube, you will have no trouble finding things to watch. I'm just going to pick a few things that I have found interesting, which I've learnt things from. This week's recommendation is a YouTube channel called Piano Tips. It's run by Stephen Wyatt. He's a piano teacher who works out of Glasgow. He does online teaching and things, but he does a huge number of very short instructional videos. At the moment, he's working through all the Czerny 599 exercises. There's 100 of those. He started at number 1. He's going all the way to 100, explaining how to play each of them as he goes. I think he's getting close to number 20. They come out 2 or 3 times a week at the moment, so he's doing a really good job. These are short pieces that they're public domain, so it's very easy to get the score if you want to get the score. He also has a published version of the score, but he shows you how to play them. He also does that for exercises and pieces from lots and lots of other places and some technique stuff. He's very clear in what he's talking about. The video quality is really good, so you can see exactly what he's doing at the piano. He has the occasional live stream as well where you can pop on and ask him some questions. So I would recommend, if you're looking for certainly a beginner to intermediate friendly channel where there are certainly things you can learn from Stefan, pop on over to Piano Tips on YouTube. I'll put a link to that, of course, in the show notes. Well, that's it for episode 1. Thank you very much if you've stayed all the way to the end. If you'd like to contact me, email is possibly still the best way. david@pianofinally.show is my email address. Piano Finally is all one word. And the website for the show, where you'll find some useful stuff and the show notes, if they're not coming up in your podcast player, is www.pianofinally.show. And you can find me on Instagram and Threads as @pianofinally. It would be nice if you want to get in contact. Let me know what you like. Let me know what you don't like. If you'd like me to do something in particular, please let me know. So that's it for episode 1. Next week, I will be back with episode 2, all things going well. And I hope you'll join me for that as well. So until the next episode, I hope your piano stays in tune and you enjoy your time at the keys. Here's a piece I'm working on at the moment. It's a Gigue by Samuel Arnold, who was around from 1740 to 1802, from page 12 of Getting to Grade 1, a book of pieces edited by Alyssa Milne and published by Hal Leonard Publishing. There's an Amazon affiliate link in the show notes. So I'm not playing the whole thing yet. This I've only been working on for a week and a bit. The correct speed is 96 dotted crotchets per minute. I think I'm at about a third of that at the moment, and I'm just going to play the right-hand part. The left-hand part is coming along, but I'm still slow at translating bass clef notes into the keys on the piano. I'm working very hard at that, so I hope that by next week I'll be able to play it, probably still very slowly, but I'll be able to play it with both hands. Do not feel obliged to listen to this. I'm, as I said before, putting it in mainly to keep myself honest with my practice, and it gives me a bit of a record of how I'm going. So, Gigue by Samuel Arnold, right hand only, far too slow.